The Return of Imray. Part 1. Imray disappears. Imray lived and worked in a little town in northern India. He was happy and well and had a lot of friends. Then one day he was not at his office or his home, and no one could find him. He suddenly disappeared. His friends could not understand where he went or why. They were worried and started looking in the rivers and lakes near the town and along the roads. They contacted the railways and the nearest seaport, but no one could find him. As the weeks passed, his friends slowly stopped talking about him. They decided to sell his guns, horses, and other things. His boss at work wrote a letter to Imray's mother in England and told her that her son disappeared. When the hot season was over, my friend, Strickland, a policeman, decided to rent Imray's house. Strickland was a rather strange man and did not say much, but I often visited him. There was always plenty of food in his house, but there were no regular times for meals. He ate walking around. He liked his guns and fishing rods, and he loved his big dog, Tidgens. She was a huge animal who ate as much as 2 men. The natives respected her. She never left her master's side. This amazing dog saved Strickland's life one night when a local criminal wanted to kill him in his sleep. Tidgens caught the man who was later hanged. From that day on, the dog wore a silver collar and slept with a fine blanket. A short time later, Strickland went to live in Imray's house, and he gave Tidgens a big room for herself where she could eat and sleep. One day, I arrived in town late in the afternoon, and since there were no rooms at the hotel, I went to visit him. Tidgens met me at the door of the house and put her paws on my shoulder to show that she was glad to see me. She did not move away until Strickland came home and greeted me. He was glad to give me a room for a few days. The house had 8 rooms, a veranda, a big garden, and everything was nice and clean. After a small, fast lunch, Strickland said,
"I'm going back to the police station for a few hours. I'll see you later."
It was a very hot summer evening, and the rainy season was starting. I had tea on the veranda where it was a little cooler. Tidgens came out on the veranda and sat next to me. She looked sad, so I gave her some biscuits. It was dark in the house, and it was raining hard. Suddenly, my servant came and said,
"Excuse me, sir. A gentleman is here and wants to see someone."
I went to the dark living room and asked the servant to bring some light. As I waited, I thought I saw a face looking at me through the window. But when the light came, I did not see anyone. Where was the gentleman who wanted to see someone? I went back to the veranda, but Tidgens was out in the garden under the pouring rain. Strickland came home very wet, and the first thing he said was,
"Has anyone called?"
I told him about the visitor who disappeared, but he did not say a thing. At 9 o'clock, Strickland wanted to go to bed, and I was tired too. Tidgens was outside in the rain, and Strickland called her several times, but she did not want to come into the house. Strickland smiled strangely and said,
"She does this every evening now. She doesn't want to sleep in the house. She started doing this after we came to live here, and I can't understand why. She's got a big, comfortable room."
He wasn't happy, but said,
"Well, let's leave her outside."
The storm and thunder and lightning went on all night, but Tidgens stayed outside. She was near the window of my room, and I could hear her moving around during the night. I looked out of the window once and saw the big dog with the hair on her neck and back standing up. She was very frightened. I did not sleep well, and had strange dreams. It seemed that someone was calling my name. Then someone tried to open my door, walked around the house, and stood on the veranda, breathing loudly. Suddenly there was a noise, and I ran into Strickland's room and asked, "Are you ill, or did you try to call me?" He was lying on his back, and I explained what happened to me. He started laughing and said,
"Oh, go back to bed."
I went back to bed and slept until the next morning. I lived in that house for 2 days. Strickland went to work at the police station every day and left me alone with Tietjens. The dog was happy inside the house during the day, but when the sun set and it became dark, she went to the veranda, where we sat together. I understood Tietjens very well, because I was happy in the house during the day too, but when it was dark, I felt very uncomfortable and did not like it. We were alone in the house, but there was another presence that I could not see. I saw that the long curtains between the rooms moved, and I could hear the noise of feet on the floor. I could hear chairs move, and doors open and close. When I went to get a book in the living room, I felt that someone was watching me from the darkest corner of the room. Tietjens stared into the dark rooms with every hair on her neck and her back standing up. She did not enter the rooms, but her eyes moved around. She could see someone or something that I could not see. Part 2. Imray returns. On the third evening during dinner, I decided to talk to Strickland about the house and its strange presence. "I'm going to the hotel tomorrow because they've got a free room now. I can't stay here any longer. I hear noises in this house, and I can't sleep at night. I'm very tired." Strickland listened carefully and understood.
"Stay with me for a few more days,"
he said,
"and see what happens. I know there's something very strange about this house. I think Tietjens knows, and that's why she stays outside after dark. Don't leave now."
Suddenly, he stopped talking and looked at one corner of the ceiling above my chair.
"Look at that."
The tails of 2 brown snakes were hanging between a thick cloth and the ceiling. I hate snakes and am afraid of them. "Let's get them down and break their backs," I said.
"Snakes like to hide between the ceiling cloth and the ceiling,"
said Strickland.
"I'm going up into the roof of this house. I'll shake them down, and you can break their backs with a long stick."
I was not very happy to help Strickland with his work, but I took a long stick while he went to get the gardener's ladder from the veranda. We could hear the snakes moving along the ceiling cloth above our heads.
"Snakes like it up there because it's warm,"
said Strickland, breaking the thick ceiling cloth with his hands. He put his head through the opening of the ceiling cloth and looked around. He said,
"There's a lot of room up here between the ceiling and the roof. I can't see any snakes, but what's this? I think I see something up here."
He started pushing at something with his gun.
"I can't get it, but be careful. It's falling down."
I jumped away, and suddenly something fell onto the dinner table. Strickland got off the ladder and stood next to me.
"I think our friend Imray has come back,"
said Strickland slowly. Something moved from under the cloth on the table. It was a brown snake. Strickland hit it with his gun and broke its back. "Is it Imray?" I asked.
"Yes, it's Imray,"
he answered.
"and someone killed him."
"That's why we heard noises in the house," I said. "It was Imray's ghost walking around."
And that's why Tietjens didn't like sleeping inside the house,
said Strickland.
She knew Imray was up there, dead.
A minute later, Tietjens came into the house. She looked at the dead body on the table and then sat down next to Strickland.
You knew about Imray all the time, didn't you?
Strickland said to his dog.
Men don't climb up into the roof to die. Someone killed Imray. But who? Let's think about it.
Let's think about it in the other room, I said. Not in here.
Excellent idea,
said Strickland.
Let's go to my room.
We sat down and started thinking.
Imray is back,
said Strickland.
The question is, who killed Imray? When I took this house, I took Imray's servants too. Did one of them kill him?
Let's call them in one at a time and question them, I said. There was a noise outside Strickland's room. It was Bahadur Khan, one of the servants.
Come in,
said Strickland.
It's a very warm night, isn't it?
Bahadur Khan was a big, tall man with a green turban. Yes, sir, he said, but it will rain soon.
When did you start working for me, Bahadur Khan?
Strickland asked. I started when you came to live here, sir, said the servant. You know, after Mr. Imray secretly went to Europe.
Imray went to Europe?
Strickland asked. That is what all the servants say, sir, said Bahadur Khan.
Will you be his servant when he returns?
Strickland asked him. Yes, of course, said the servant.
This is very strange,
said Strickland.
I asked the other servants, but they didn't know. Mr. Imray never said anything about a trip to Europe to anyone. Don't you think that's strange?
It is strange, sir, said the servant, who was frightened now.
You know, Bahadur,
said Strickland,
I think Imray is back again. He's back in this house, and he's waiting for his old servant. Take a lamp and go to the next room.
The man was frightened now. He picked up the lamp and went into the dining room. Strickland picked up his gun from the floor and followed him. The tall servant went to the next room and looked at the ceiling. Then he saw the dying snake on the floor and stopped near the table to look at the dead man. The servant's face was grey with fear.
Do you see?
Asked Strickland coldly.
Mr. Imray is back.
I see, sir, said the servant.
I know you killed him, Bahadur Khan, said Strickland. Now tell me why.
Yes, I killed him, sir, said Bahadur Khan, but he was not a good man. One day he saw my child who was 4 years old. He said he was a handsome child, and he put his hand on his head. The next day my child was ill, very ill. He had a fever and died 10 days later. Mr. Imray killed my son. He was a wizard, a bad man. I killed him when he was sleeping. Then I put his body between the ceiling cloth and the roof. Strickland looked at me and said,
Did you hear that? He killed Imray. You were clever, Bahadur Khan,
said Strickland.
But Mr. Imray came back, and you'll be hanged for this. I'm taking you to the police station now.
Bahadur Khan did not try to escape. He stared at the floor and suddenly lifted his foot. No, sir, said Bahadur Khan sadly. You're not taking me to the police station. Hanging is a terrible dishonor for me and my people. Look, sir. He lifted his foot and we saw the head of the little brown carite snake that Strickland hit before. Its teeth were in his foot, and Bahadur was dying. In an hour he was dead, and the police took him and Imray away. Strickland and I sat down and looked at each other.
"Did you hear what Bahadur said?"
asked Strickland calmly. "Yes, I did," I answered quietly. Unfortunately, Imray made a big mistake.
"He didn't know about the superstitions of these people,"
Strickland said. "No, he didn't," I said. Imray's ghost left the house, and Tietjens came back and slept in her room.